here?
I guess it's good.
Good.
All right.
Good, how are you? Is Todd coming?
No, he's on vacation.
Oh, great.
Okay. Favorite.
I love that.
Call to order. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Andrew, you're over here.
The Park City School District Work Session on July 29th at 10 a.m. Pledge of allegiance. Maybe we can do this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. We'll go straight to the master planning update. Mr. Tanner?
The meeting today is designed to bring the board kind of up to speed and kind of focus our efforts on what the district hopes to do or some considerations for our energy conservation projects. As you recall, we put a space holder in place of about $75 a square foot, which is about $24 million for green initiatives that we have earmarked right now. That's spread over the course of all of our projects. And we worked with MOCA to help try to fine tune that effort to kind of give us an idea on some decisions that will go. So, simple things that'll be part of this discussion are, should we concentrate our efforts all on one school with a massive project? Should we split it across schools? Should we split it across schools based upon targets of opportunity that might be low-hanging fruit within a school? Should we design to a standard like LEED or with energy utilization, those kind of things, or should it be a combination of all those? So I think today's discussion is going to bring us kind of up to speed on what are some of those design considerations. What is LEED certification? What is energy utilization? What are some of the things we can do from a building to materials perspective to get us in the green directive? And also House Bill 411, how it interfaces with our planning. As you recall, that's the purchasing renewable energy off the Rocky Mountain power grid that can be very beneficial to us as a district, and how do we interface with that. So we had some discussions last week, Monday. MOCA fine-tuned the conversation, their team. On Friday, we had a follow-up meeting. On Friday, we kind of make sure that we're all gelled together for today's meeting. And we're here today with Paul to help walk us through the PowerPoint presentation. And Jill and I and Todd Hanson are here, obviously, to answer any questions from an organizational perspective. But the subject matter expert on this is Paul, and he's going to present the presentation for us today.
Thank you, Michael. And I'll apologize up front. If I don't have some of the answers you're looking for, I'll write them down. We'll get back to you on it, because initially David would have been presenting this, but he's on the road traveling today. So what we'll do is we'll walk through, as Michael said, kind of the slide presentation we put together, and we thought it was important. And Michael, I don't know if you saw this, but we thought it was important after we got to thinking about this between Friday and today to, if you go to the next slide, to re-look at the priorities as they were discussed and established a few months ago in meetings with y'all. And the priorities were established at that point in time, which were moving grade 9 into the high school, provide for CTE, and we'll kind of update the process as we go through this as well. That is out on the street now. The RFSQ is on the street for design build teams. We had the mandatory pre-qualification meeting a couple weeks ago. We had a good turnout for that. We had another one for Echo Hill today to start that process. So some of these are now kind of getting into motion, and will lead us into this discussion on green energy or green solutions. The next item, priority number 2, was combining grades 6, 7, and 8 at Echo Hill for the middle school. That is the meeting we had this morning. Again, we had a good turnout on that, so we'll see where that goes. Priority number 3 was provide additional pre-kindergarten classrooms in every elementary school, wraparound services at 2 strategic sites that work better on that site than the other sites. So as Michael said, I think it's important that we establish from a high level perspective, the philosophy of the board, what do we want to do? Do we want to pool this money, set it aside to do something as a district initiative? Do we want to focus on each school specifically, and are we going to contain it to that $75 a square foot number for each school? Understanding that our priorities are these 1 through 7, and it just so happens that the 7th priority has a placeholder of approximately $24 million. Which you look at that and say, well, that's not really our highest priority. So there's going to be some hard decisions that have to be made as we go through the process, through the project, when we're talking about dollars, when we're talking about time, when we're talking about different aspects of the process, where we fall back on these priorities and say, okay, do we really want to spend the dollars here, or do we want to take them and put the dollars towards mitigating the student disruption by having a longer construction schedule? It's going to be that kind of balancing act, I guess is the best way to describe it. So that being said, we'll go to the next slide, please. We're looking at this as kind of a high-level energy workshop discussion. So the objective is to understand energy options, what we're talking about, what we're looking at, and then the outcome of this meeting, in our mind, what we're looking to do, and obviously this is subject to where y'all want to go with it, is we want to know what the board expectations are. What does the board care about the most regarding these energy options? We want to establish some board priorities and principles similar to what we did for the entire program. We want to look at it from an energy standpoint and say, okay, what are the priorities? Where do we want to use as our kind of governing guidelines to follow? And then from a bigger perspective, is going to be just a school board policies and procedures related to green initiatives and where things go with the school district. And then the last thing is going to be implementation of these priorities in the upcoming design and construction projects. And there will be some real pressure on establishing those priorities because we'll be receiving the qualification packages for the high school here pretty soon, shortlisting the firms. And then immediately following that, an RFP will be issued to those firms, to the shortlisted firms, to provide pricing and a technical proposal as to how they're going to approach designing and constructing the Park City High School addition. So part of that pricing will be affected by what directive we give them. An example would be, or do we expect them to go survey the entire Park City High School and come up with a list of green projects that would address the whole high school? Or do we focus on our additions, which is, we're adding this space, or 3 spaces. Do we want to make those as energy efficient as possible while not necessarily paying attention to the entire campus, assuming the entire campus would be addressed at some later date through some other funding source or some other initiative?
Well, can you clarify for me then, so is the 24 million just on the new construction? We've kind of gone through this a few different times too, trying to really define what this means. Because that would help.
It was based on it was $75 per square foot based on the square footage of new construction.
On new construction.
Yes.
So you just said if we wanted to look at the high school and assess the entire footprint, the 24 isn't reflective of the whole footprint? It's just of the new build?
It's
Okay,
correct.
got
Correct.
it.
We have 1 million square feet in the district.
What's
Just so
that?
you know, we have 1 million square feet in the district.
Okay.
Right close to that.
Okay.
So
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that, so the idea is for new, but it would create some base and foundation potentially, depending on what it is that's established or built, that could impact the rest of the campus,
Correct.
right? Or the existing square feet there, right?
get things
I mean, as
started.
we start to understand what these environmental sustainable things look like, which
And
is not my
as
wheelhouse.
you'll see during the discussion too, that the House Bill 411, our ability to purchase green energy through Rocky Mountain Power Distribution Grid is kind of a strategic piece of this too. Right? We can kind of sidestep perhaps an individual solar project in the school, still get the benefit of that renewable source that we're purchasing from, and then leverage the money that's left there to address site-specific projects.
Okay.
That might be a different way of looking at this. So Paul's going to talk a little bit more about that
Great.
too.
So can I bring this down to like a super elementary level? Green enhancements, you could get materials that are green, and that would be for the new construction. But you could also, in green enhancements, build something thermal, whatever, that ends up impacting the rest of the existing building.
Yes.
So we're not gonna have some green enhancement part of the high school, I mean, we will initially, if we go about this, it'll be greener than the rest, but it still could impact essentially converting some of the issues that are existing right now.
Right, and so the site-specific stuff that we're perhaps going to look at for each building may dictate what's the smartest thing to do, what's the highest
Got it.
ROI
Highest
project per
impact.
building, or maybe not anything at this building, maybe we double up
Got it.
one building towards the other. That's kind of what we're trying to funnel down
Okay.
right now in this discussion, to give you kind of a feel of what the global picture is, what are some of the standards that are out there, and what are some of the things that we can aspire to as an organization and policy,
Okay.
for the district.
And that really sets the stage for the rest of this discussion. Where you were going with that is where this kind of presentation
Right.
goes. So, okay, and I think another way to look at this and what we're trying to do is, it seems as though when the budget was originally established and these discussions originally occurred, I don't know that the level of detail to that discussion, obviously, of what this $75 per square foot really meant. Hence the discussion of, do we want to just apply this? Do we want to focus on our new additions? Do we want to make it a bigger part of a bigger process? And that's just kind of the evolution and part of this, the reason for this discussion. So the next item kind of runs through a list of energy options. And again, this is meant to be high level. I'm not an expert in energy or green energy or that kind of stuff. So if this wants to get more detailed than we are, we can set that up. But some of the kind of the governing factors is we've got the House Bill 411. We have sustainable design. And we'll run through these on an item-by-item basis as we run through the presentation. Reduction of EUI, energy utilization intensity. I've also heard that as energy use index, which is just the amount of energy used at a facility. There are LEED certification criteria and requirements that define a design. There are light harvesting methods of improving a space. There are many different things you can do to mechanical systems to enhance and improve efficiency. There are resilient design options, and then there is also this reference to net zero energy, which you'll hear a lot of these days too. So we'll run through each of these item by item. The next slide, please. So a little bit of discussion on House Bill 411, and Michael, you might be a little more familiar with this one than I am. If you'd like to speak to this one, I'll
Sure. The General Assembly in 2019 passed a House Bill 411, which allows us to purchase from the grid, the Rocky Mountain Power Grid, through renewable sources. And those are primarily a solar farm out in the Tooele area, supplemented by some wind and also some hydroelectric type stuff that feeds into the grid. And so a consortium of communities got together. Park City is a participant along with Summit County. They've signed on as being lead people in this process. And because they are signed on, we have the ability to purchase from that source. Now, I haven't seen a commitment yet what date this is going to happen. I've heard, a year from now. I've heard up to 10 years from now, and I can't find anything that talks about when that's actually going to happen. But as you can probably imagine, a economy of scale type energy production facility that's sitting out in the desert that's feeding big megawattage into a grid is much more efficient than us putting solar panels on the roof, particularly in the high snow load environment that we have here. And so it just makes common sense for us to leverage this. This right here, just this one step would allow us to straight face and say, hey, all of our energy is coming from renewable sources, everything that we're purchasing here. The word that's out there is that they'll do this a marginal increase in cost versus the current market rates. The 1% to 2% is the number that I've heard. But what makes this a little bit difficult is relying on this project that's out there, but not having a definite delivery time on when we can actually buy this energy. So that's something we need to drill down on more, but I think that we'd be foolhardy in that leveraging this standard we can release those funds that might be used for solar projects in other directions to make our stuff more sustainable and greener. So that's the direction we're going down. I just want the board to be aware that this is out there, it's real. Park City, Summit County are signed on to it as commitments.
So are Deer Valley, this is exactly what Deer Valley and Park City Mountain Resort also agreed to go
Oh.
completely.
Right.
So this is the project they bought into as well.
Right.
So who's driving, so who's the one that's kind of the bottleneck? Who is that?
There really is not a bottleneck.
Oh, like, I
You
mean,
just
the
need to
one-
sign up for it.
But you were just saying you're not sure, it could be a year out. Who's the one- It's who's the one determining that, do you know?
I don't
Okay.
at this point.
It's probably
All I know
Rocky
is it's.
Yes.
Oh, Rocky Mountain.
Yeah,
Okay.
But like I said, it's real, it's coming,
Okay.
it's, everybody's signed on to it, it's just a matter of when we
Okay.
have
So the only con is really the timeline with this.
it.
Okay.
Price wise, I'm told that there's just a marginal market increase of 1 to 2%. Whether or not that's the case, I don't know. The reliability of it, I think has got to be worked out. I'm sure it is. If we get these 20 signatories on there. We're just kind of a customer. We're actually not in the decision-making process for this. So, like I said, it's really just a decision for us to buy. And this was one of the green initiatives that the students brought up.
Yeah,
During,
yeah.
They were saying, hey, you want us to do this in 10 years, we might be able to do this in 1 year.
Yeah.
We might be able to do this faster.
That'd be great.
And it really makes sense, like I said, for this stuff to be produced at a macro level and us to be consumers of it versus us to put these individual projects in place that have, varying levels of effectiveness based upon our snow levels up in this area.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of the background for House Bill 411. We just want you to be aware that it's out there and that I think it makes sense for us to strategically leverage this to free our resources up for other things.
So when you're considering what questions the board has or what decisions, like if we're looking at what are decisions we have to make, is it a decision we have to make that we are signed on to this? Or is this something that is naturally happening because we're in
We
some,
have to.
or we're just trying to see how it fits in?
Yeah, we have to affirmatively sign on to it, but I
Yeah.
don't anticipate any issues with us signing on to it.
Okay.
I don't hear resistance from you.
No.
I certainly wouldn't be resistant. I think it's just a matter of getting it done.
Okay.
Yeah. Perfect.
And this also works in your favor when we get into the kind of the net zero conversation, or zero net energy, depending on you refer to that. Because there are options for reaching net zero where you're purchasing power from these types of grids that goes as a credit against what you're using in other areas. So it's kind of a win-win when you get
Okay.
into these setups.
Great.
Okay, the next slide is referencing sustainable design. And this is something, obviously, when we bring on the design build team on these projects, it's really kind of a standard approach to designing work these days anyway. But what that'll pertain to and what it'll include is it's integrating all of these, what we'll call energy efficient designs or ideas into the design to make the building more efficient and more green friendly is probably the best way to put it. The architects will be responsible for identifying products that comply with the sustainability goals that are set for the project and that meet or exceed it. And that could include optimizing the site potential, which is you position your building, which our projects won't really be amenable to this as we're not building new buildings per se, but you try to position your building north facing, south facing, and to best utilize the sun in the winter and the summertime. Optimizing energy use, protecting and conserving water is a big deal, as we all know. Optimizing the building space and material use, enhancing indoor environmental quality, that's a big thing, and optimizing operational maintenance practices, which Todd can obviously attest to, that we always want to keep an eye on while designing efficient spaces, that we keep spaces that are easily maintainable and serviceable. The next slide references the energy utilization intensity or energy utilization index. In the EUI, expresses the building's energy use as a function of its size or other characteristics, and a lot of times it's a function of the building's function as well, be it an educational facility, a healthcare facility, or an office space. And again, a lot of what we're talking about through the practices and the approach we're planning to take will bring down the EUI for these spaces. And again, we're looking at it, the new space will be as efficient as it can be. The existing space is going to be what it is, unless there's a decision made to either analyze or do something with that space. But that would also, again, kind of work against one of our currently existing priorities, which is to minimize disruption to the students. I mean, the more we can stay out of the existing spaces, and the more we can not mess with existing systems, the less disruption there will be. So we'll have to keep that in mind.
And philosophically, this is really a first step, right? I mean, if you want to maximize the efficiency of your building envelope, that's the primary place where you're saving energy. Right? So if you're hooking up to Rocky Mountain Power or you're not, or you got solar panel or geothermal, all that stuff is wasted if you don't have an efficient building envelope. So this standard here is very important that we build towards something like that, something like that. Kind of putting your money in.
And we have measures of this currently, right? I imagine.
You know, Todd has done some limited energy studies. I think that we would have to really enhance those with new architects to find out A, where are we at, and B, where can we go, and what do we have to do to make that happen. But we can certainly put this as a priority with the architects and say, and set the standard. I'll say we want you to build at this standard, 30, 35. That's what we're going now.
You'd be curious to see what our baseline is. Yeah.
Todd, do we have any information on that?
We don't. We're working on that right now,
Yeah.
just because I'm sure that we'd like to know what our difference is. So, yeah.
Thanks.
So another measurable goal that is established for a lot of projects these days are the different levels of LEED certification. And we have been on projects that have approached this in two different ways. One is to actually go through the LEED certification process, get the LEED plaque, put it on the building at the end of the day. And then the other is to design to LEED standards, be it a silver or gold standard, and then not go through the process of actually certifying the building. The benefit to that is you don't spend the money on the LEED certification process while you're still getting the same level of performance. The disadvantage is you just don't get the marketing potential from having a LEED plaque in your building. It's in my mind, it's kind of the pluses and minuses.
So it's very expensive.
It's not cheap.
The high school price tag?
Yeah, in high school, we spent $30 million on, that was our total cost, and to get a silver LEED certificate, it was $130,000 to be certified.
In some of our research on this too, you can count on at least paying $60,000 for the plaque, plus adding up to 10% in your building standards, your project standards to get to that level. So it's significantly expensive, but what Paul is saying is that we can get benefit without getting the certification, but then we lose the street cred
Right.
associated with
But
it.
does that certificate or plaque get you anything as far as grants, or, is there anything that comes in because we have a plaque that would offset the cost of that, or is it basically just, great job guys, there's your plaque?
Yes.
Okay, that's it, there's no reciprocation
It's all
to get
optics.
grants or
But it's
whatever.
basically 10 years from now, when the kids come back and say, we're not sure we're doing enough with sustainability, you can at least send them back to the plaque to say, like right now, we can go back to the plaque in the high school and say, we did this addition to the LEED silver level, and then these are all the things that means. So it's really more of a remembrance thing, but this was something I talked with our Ed Foundation about. They might be able to help do some fundraising towards the actual plaque and certification, so taxpayer dollars wouldn't be spent on that, but still have that
And
level.
times have changed a lot, but when Todd initially went for this LEED certification, correct me if I'm wrong, you took some political heat.
Yeah,
from
big time from the school board.
Yeah.
They didn't like it. They were pretty upset about spending that kind of money on a plaque.
But that was, obviously 15 years ago.
Yes.
The project happened.
Can we pull that out as a line item in all of this, so as we're going through, we can, if we get funding, just so that it doesn't evaporate, there's still gonna be this plaque, you know what I mean, that we can just keep in and we can decide how it's funded, how important is it, just so it doesn't Just
Yeah,
go on the table at
I
some
think
point?
the options are infinite of what you want to do with it.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to get it certified and have the plaque, we can do that. Obviously, there's resource constraints, you know, both from the 10% add-on factor with the building piece plus the 60,000 plus to get the
Yeah.
certification. And the question is, where's your money best spent? Is it best spent buying that, or is it best spent donating to a project that's really SOB?
Well, and the other thing to talk about though is it's not the actual plaque itself that it costs the money. The plaque is the plaque. It's the external review or audit
Bureaucracy,
of
yeah.
the project to make sure it's doing what.
Certification of what
It's
we
the
say it is.
certification of it. That's what the cost is.
And you're telling us right now that the plan would be to have everything in place that could lead to a certification outside of the bureaucracy or those coming in and reviewing it? That our goal is to still
To build to
be
that certification.
sustainable
Yes.
and lead certified ways.
Build to a silver LEED
Builds
certification.
to silver, okay.
Yeah, and we're not trying to dictate this or say this is
Yeah.
the direction to go. We're going to say this is a building standard option that we can
Okay.
aspire to and you know, something else.
Is that the $75 a square foot is silver certification, or is that separate to that number?
The $75 was simply a placeholder, right, that we put in place that ended up at a $24 million price tag. We can divert that $75 into whatever direction you want it to go if it's LEED certification.
Right, I guess my question is like, if we take that out, right, if we take the $75 a square foot out, and we have whatever the budget is without that, is the budget assuming that the things we're building are to a silver certification, or is that on top of what we budgeted outside of the $75 a square foot?
Paul, can you comment?
My guess is with that one, is that some of that $75 would be necessary to hit silver, or obviously anything above silver. The thing we have going for us is 10 or 15 years ago when it started, getting some of these LEED certified materials they were expensive because they were kind of newer on the market. They were having to get the low VOC, which wasn't as common as it is now in the carpet and that kind of stuff that does not have gas. And now that's more of I'd almost call it more of a standard. It's so you can hit silver less, let me say less expensively, but it's not as big a deal to hit silver now as it used to be. So I don't think that that necessarily take that whole 75. And again, when we talk about that 75, the kind of the bad thing about having that 75 as that target number is that every school is different. And every school is going to have, we've got different pieces we're at, be it a gymnasium, be it a classroom. And so a gymnasium has a different floor than a classroom is going to have, the carpet versus the athletic floor. So then you get into different types of materials that you're going to use anyway. So whatever the LEED capacity is of those materials or what you have available is going to affect your pricing ultimately. So it's going to be almost apples and oranges depending on which facilities we're referring to. So to say if you're looking at it as though, okay, we've got $75 a square foot, we're going to take that off because we don't want to have that in our budget. Now we want to build our buildings to reach that minimum silver expectation. I don't know if you could get there or not. But that would be one of the dictates or mandates we give to the design build team is, look, we need a minimum of a LEED silver design. We want to define to them up front whether they're going to have to go through the LEED process, because there's a lot they do during the design process. It's through the construction process, through the paperwork, documentation. So again, it's a viable option to say, we're going to design the LEED silver, we're going to design the LEED gold, but we're not going to go through the certification process. And then that saves you the amount of the LEED registration, the LEED plaque, and which could be, as they were saying, $100,000, a couple $100,000, depending on the size of the project. So that's really the kind of the crux of this discussion. I don't know how familiar everybody is with LEED, with what it means, but it's, as it kind of talks about here, the minimum level is silver. And what it normally addresses, it's natural lighting in spaces, it's indoor environmental quality, it's building efficiency, it's low E glass. So there's a lot of things that it hits on and touches on that are all in the goal of sustainability and overall general health of the individual occupying the space. And then every step you go up, it's just incrementally more expensive because of now it limits the amount of materials you can pick from to use as you go from silver to gold to platinum.
I think this point two might be a good place to bring up. We've kind of got a funding disconnect intuitively here, right? We've said $75 per square foot based upon our building enhancements, right? Which is $24 million. But now we're kind of looking at this as our kitty to spread across the entire buildings versus just that particular section that we're adding on. So somehow we need to resolve that, and I don't know if that's a site-specific project here or a site-specific project there. We'll walk through things, but I think our goal is to give us the highest return on investment, the biggest bang for the buck with the limited budget that we have. And we have, these standards we can aspire to. We have building-specific projects we can aspire to. We just need to flesh that out with the board and figure out exactly where we want to go. Because, like I said, that $75 was put in there as a spaceholder for those add-ons. It wasn't really designed as to be spread across the district. And now we're kind of looking at it as, okay, how do we spread this across the district to optimize our green initiatives?
Is it kind of like, one is new and two is retrofitting old, right? So we should look at, is that kind of how you're seeing it? We need
Yeah,
to
so
focus
it's-
on what happens with the new, and then, and how much is that? And then what happens to retrofit? And what does that mean? Like, if we can't hit all of these, like, sorry, the pipes are the pipes, and we're not going to not replace them, so that's kind of a non-starter.
It may be something as simple as, okay, we look at, our two elementaries, we'll say Jeremy Apartments, okay? Jeremy might be a great candidate for geothermal. We might be able to say, okay, we're going to enhance our new construction, but then on top of that, we're going to enhance our mechanical systems to reflect this. Harley's that might not be a good candidate for geothermal. It might be better that it's got some boilers that are inefficient that we can preempt those efficiencies. Like we'll replace the gas-fired boilers with electric boilers. We want to go there. And those are just some examples of site-specific stuff that we'll have to look at and rack and stack and figure out, where we can best apply that $24 million that we've got in mind right
Okay, cool.
Okay. The next item on the next slide just references daylight harvesting. I think everybody's probably familiar with what that means and getting natural light into spaces. Just the general health benefit associated with that. But that can take a lot of different terms as to how you get it there, whether it's skylights, it's light wells, whether it's transoms above doors to get lights from here into the hall, daylight. So again, this is just another design alternative process for enhancing spaces. The next item is to look at mechanical systems. And again, when we were conversing last week, my initial approach to this, or my initial thought, was that as we get into these remodels and as we get into building these new spaces on these schools or remodeling whatever space we're going to remodel, is we've got a set budget, and those budgets, no matter how big they seem when you first get started, they're not normally as big as they seem once you get into it, especially with the remodel. And so my initial comment was, if we're not affecting a piece of equipment on the existing school, or if we don't need to affect that piece of equipment in order to accommodate our new space, then we should just leave it alone. That should be a part of existing mechanical maintenance and that sort of stuff. And then it was kind of brought out, well, maybe we should look at upgrading it. Maybe we should look at a bigger picture than kind of the way I'm going into this. And the reason this becomes really important is when we bring in the design build team, we've got to give them that direction right up front as to, okay, we're gonna add on 70,000 square feet. In order to do that, you need to look at the existing mechanical system, see what's capable of handling some additional loads, see what's not. And then we need to come up with our new equipment that needs to be added, do we need an extension onto the mechanical room? Do we need to build a new mechanical room? How do we accommodate this new space? And that may want to be taken a step further to say, okay, maybe we should look at the existing mechanical room, analyze the whole thing and say, maybe if we upgrade these pieces, pull these out, make them higher efficiency, then it's into the conversation of, are we using the most efficient equipment in there now, or should we upgrade some of that equipment? to help the overall efficiency of the building. So there's that level of definition that we've got to come to in expectation, so we're all on the same page as to saying, as we go into each of these facilities, here's our approach, our general concept is how we're going to approach this question.
What was budgeted so far? So if you, in the initial budget numbers, was it assumed that, was there any work done on, let's say, okay, you need to add X amount of power to this building because of the addition, and the existing mechanical can handle it or can't?
So
Was
from
that looked at or no?
From what I can tell from the estimates and from the information that we had, this is strictly for the new space. Like, it doesn't go back and upgrade mechanical systems.
Well, no, I understand that it's not upgrading. My question is you have a 100,000 square foot building, right? You assume the mechanical can handle 100,000 square feet.
Mhm.
When you build another 30,000 square feet, is it add-on, or is it, like, I assume that someone went in and said, okay, well, this mechanical system can't take on 30,000 more square feet, or it can, right? So that's my question. Was that included in the estimates, or was that something that is going to come out only once the remodel starts and is going to cause overages?
Mhm.
I think that was in the GSBS, because GSBS did a full facility assessment of
Right.
all the mechanical rooms. They crawled on every roof, they did all that stuff, and they were the ones who informed MHTN's work on what might this look like. So MHTN was aware of what some of those limitations are, and we do know that some of our buildings have very tight mechanical rooms. You can't really add a whole lot more into the, where they are now and how they're functioning. And the age of those things were also taken into consideration on where the replacement might happen.
Like, in terms of how many additional square feet would trigger
Right.
the need for additional
Yeah.
work in the mechanical room.
Yes.
It's in
Right. Is
those
that the
138
question?
pages.
And then at what stage, so I would follow up to that, does it trigger, is the budget set out, the addition to the mechanical room, or whatever triggered what new things need to be added or edited or whatever we revised in the mechanical room to address the additional square feet? Is that coming out of this environmental, this $75 a square foot, or is this coming out of a different part of the budget?
That's a different part of the budget.
So this technically would not take up part of what is 24 million.
It would be if we added a different boiler, like an electric boiler.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. We're gonna have
So
to add
as the
pumps and,
existing mechanical room, if that is enhanced in its existing form, that is not part of this 24 mil.
it'll probably take a little bit of that fund, not a bunch, because they've already added in part of that system. But for green enhancement, it would probably, the extra cost would probably come a little bit out of that.
Okay.
But if you want to go like geothermal, then that's.
Yeah, that would be totally out of that.
Then
Yeah,
you're
It's a total different
Yeah.
heating system.
And I can tell you that Todd has methodically gone through our boilers, and every time he's had to do an upgrade, he's put the most efficient thing in place, right?
right.
Right now, the most efficient thing is gas utilization, and that's exactly what the public and the green initiative is trying to pull us away from, is that petrochemical use, right? The question is, where are you at on that spectrum? It's very inefficient. Now you got an electrically fired boiler. If anybody's ever heated a home with electric, you know that it's terrible in terms of efficiency. And so in many cases, you would even have to have, even if you had an electric boiler, you'd have to have a gas backup to hit those big spikes when you drop 20 degrees below zero and the electrical can't handle it. So we individually got to look at each one of where are we at each one of the buildings? What is the most likely project prioritized based upon the aging of our current stuff? And like I said, produce a list of site-specific
Site-by-site.
projects with price tags, if you guys want to walk down that pathway too. And that's something that we would charge our architects who are under the RFSQ process right now, would take a look at that design and get standard.
And actually, but all of our schools are air conditioned, right?
No,
Oh,
And in fact, that actually worked to our advantage
Yeah.
with some of this air circulation stuff. And what Todd has been doing, we've got a master control system in place. Who's the main
Carrier.
The carrier. So as we mentioned before, Todd can look at each one of the buildings individually, all the valves, everything in each one of the valves. And just for example, what he does with Jeremy in the fall, when it's hot during the day, cool at night, he pulls in all that cool air into the building to sink into the concrete, to sink into the floors, to kind of provide some residual refrigeration effect. That the kids are cold in the morning,
Yeah,
but then by
yeah.
the time school lets out, the building's
Warm again.
is warm again. So he takes advantage of those nightly cycles in our buildings that aren't air conditioned to really be very efficient. And it's really helped us out with our COVID air quality issues. We just amped up that air exchange, the circulation piece, just to keep our air cleaner inside. So
Is that AC going to be a criteria? I mean, I guess I should ask everybody, now that we've kind of seen some weirdo global issues, it was, almost 90 at Treasure last week. Is that a criteria we want to set, or do we need to discuss it at another time, that some sort of an efficient cooling system is a priority for all of the schools?
That's certainly something we could throw on the table. I know school districts are struggling with that nationwide, right? Because most school districts, like in the Chicago area along the lake, right? You don't really need air conditioning most of the time in the
Right,
summer.
right.
But societal standards have changed. People, it's not acceptable to be sweating in your classroom anymore, like when I was a kid, right? But now it's changed and people are demanding that. So I think as buildings retrofit, people do those upgrades. But I don't know if we as a district want to prepare for perhaps an eventuality of low temperatures. I don't know what that
I'm
thing
just
is.
worried about the additional costs. If we add on to this,
Yeah, I was just thinking of last week and having my kid in summer school. I don't even know if Treasure's air conditioned or not. It's not,
it's not.
So, just thinking ahead, if we're looking at 30 years, what might this plant look like in 30 years and what might our summers look like up here?
Right.
Most of my neighbors have never needed air conditioning and they're all putting in AC
Right,
this summer.
right,
So
right.
it's kind of seeing a shift, might we, and I don't know what a small cooler is or does, or there are other more efficient cooling methods that we should consider in this.
Well, and I think that begs the question, right? The $75 per square foot, $24 million is what we threw out as a placeholder. Is it actually the number you guys want to be at, as a district? And if we don't do it now, when's the next bite of the apple we're going to get? Is it 10, 15 years down the road? Do we want to have a bigger project rolled in now, or do we want to, to minimize the project based upon, our scope that's out there and the impact on the public?
Here's a question. So taking a step back, right? Because the $24 million is kind of an arbitrary number, right? And like it could either make sense or it couldn't, depending on what that gets you, right? So from a overall, if let's say we align ourselves with the community standard of net zero by 2030, right? How much does the $75 a square foot get us towards that goal versus buying all renewable power from the grid, right? Or, because it seems like we're looking at it in a backward sense, like we're assigning an arbitrary number to potential improvements that may or may not actually move the needle. But they're all nice to have, but do they really make a difference? And so the question, and I don't know if we have the answer, but how much energy are we using? And if we switch it all over to, we've got to be the largest energy user in the city, right? So if the city's goal is to get to net zero by 2030, what's our role in that? And if we buy all renewable, does that get us there? Or does it get us 50% of the way there, 80%? Like what are we looking at?
That's what would be nice to have when these engineers come in and do an assessment of all these buildings. It would be nice to get that information. What's the best way to go for that?
Have you spoken to Luke Carton at all at the city, or
Yeah.
have you worked with that? Because I have to imagine they've made some estimates based on our usage, right? We have to be the biggest,
We are.
right? We're the biggest square footage. We have to be the biggest user of energy, right? So, I think that's like, I don't see how we can make a decision to spend $24 million without even understanding where that fits into does it help us,
The overall
does it get us there, right? Because if it gets us to, if buying clean energy plus $24 million gets us to net zero, well, probably the community supports it. If spending $24 million gets us from, reduces our energy consumption by 10%, well, it's not a good use of money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and just for a point of reference, we spend about $1 million a year in gas and electric. So if you eliminated all of it, really save $1 million a year, so the paybacks are relatively small.
Well, I guess that's the question, right? Is like, it's not going to make economic sense.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't make any economic sense. The only reason we would do it is because it makes environmental sense.
Right.
And so the question that has to be answered before we can make a decision on, I wouldn't vote to spend $25 million on something if we don't know what percentage of energy usage it reduces, or what it kind of gets us in the big scheme of getting to net zero.
Well, that's where I go back to the initial assertion that I made, right? This is kind of a 1-2 punch, right? We're buying energy from a renewable source. We want to make sure that our envelopes are as efficient as possible, right? Before we even touch any of the mechanical systems or anything else. So I think that initially is where our focus needs to be, and I think that's what the conversation has been in our presentation here. But you're right, Andrew. I don't know what that is yet, and I don't know what the rack is stacked projects and priorities are, and what those will do in terms of bringing our efficiency up. That's something we have to study with the folks that we're bringing aboard, and that'll be part. That's part of what we're screening for in the RSQ right now, to ensure that the firm that we bring on has that expertise.
And I think, you've hit on the biggest part of the struggle, which is, because it keeps going back to there is a specified dollar amount per square foot identified for each school, and that just sticks in everybody's head. Well, it's $24 million. What's that getting us?
Yeah.
And the problem we've really got is we're not building, 8 new schools from ground up. We're adding on pieces to multiple schools, and so from a campus net zero perspective, your odds of bringing yourself close to net zero by these add-ons are slim to none. All you're doing is adding some more usage. Now, what you can do, though, again, from a due diligence standpoint and just efficiency, is we can design these spaces as efficient as possible with an envelope that's as efficient as possible, with systems, or if we need to modify some of the existing systems and make those as efficient as possible, so that overall you're helping your overall cost while your impact directly to that campus. If it's only 1/3 of the space that exists that you're adding, you can't expect to affect that other 2/3. It's existing. Not with this project that's only dealing with the new facilities.
Which is going to be about 1/3.
Well, it varies from campus to campus as to how much
But
that.
overall.
We have
the
1 million
district.
square feet. Right?
Yeah, we have
We're
1 million
adding
square feet.
how much?
How many square feet?
250,000?
Yeah.
So we're a quarter. I don't know the rest of my head.
25%.
It's about 25.
Yeah.
Okay,
Call it a quarter.
overall.
So it's like my view is
Yeah.
there's no way,
No.
we're not building, as you just pointed out, we're not building new buildings, right?
Right.
That's the only way you get to net zero.
Right, so it's almost, it's not fair to say it's throwing good money after bad, but it's like, we're not gonna, our goal should probably just be to build the additions as energy efficiently as possible. And, have good windows.
Which there is a premium. for.
Yeah.
There's a premium.
Like do it with good windows,
Yes.
with good supplies, things like that, which we've already probably spec'd out, and we know we want to be as efficient as possible, right? And then,
And then make sure that we're signing up with the,
yeah, and then try to buy as clean energy as
And
possible.
we
So-
just keep plugging away on different projects through, and that's what we've been doing.
So a resolution could look like, or a commitment could a commitment be, you're heading towards net zero and all new additions, that we would only build towards net zero?
I'm not even
All new
sure how they
additions.
evaluate, if you
But I
make
mean,
that
it's a
statement.
lead standard, what if you
It's-
say, oh, sorry, but even if it's not a lead, okay, like, whatever
Whether
that
it's certified
resolution
or
is, we
not.
are aiming toward, by, that all new additions, we commit to,
Working
net zero
towards a net
in
zero goal.
anything,
Yeah.
and then any modifications are hedging towards the environmental option or the
it's
sustainable
the
option
main-
and
Right
anything
option,
that we
yeah.
modify or enhance at any
Yeah, 'cause
existing
we've made a
building.
decision that we're not tearing down
Right.
buildings and starting over, so.
But could we
There's only
commit
so
to something
much-
like that? And then break down, what does it look like to be net zero in any addition and 25% of our overall property?
Well, because I
Have a
think too,
possibility.
I mean, if we're going net zero, then are we going back to LEED? Is that what
Right,
net
that's-
zero is? Is that?
I'm talking about that house.
No, I understand. Oh, no, I understand that. Okay, but you're saying like all new building too. So I just want to be clear. Are we going?
Hold on, so here's a question.
I'm not
Dumb
referring to the
question, but
LEED
like,
stuff.
what is,
That's what I.
how is net zero defined?
That's where.
Yeah.
Right,
In terms
that's what-
of,
exactly.
because it's probably a
Exactly,
definition, right? Because if we're adding a quarter,
That's not silver.
of our-
That's not net zero.
if we're adding a quarter of our square footage, right, in theory, our energy usage is gonna go up by a quarter, right? And it's probably gonna go up by a little less than a quarter
Be
because
more efficient.
we're gonna be more efficient. So let's say, like the only thing we can realistically target is some kind of reduction of overall energy usage.
PUI.
Yeah,
But in new or in all?
in all.
In all, okay.
Right, because the new, so we have 1 million square feet, which
Right.
is not very efficient, right? If we add a quarter of our square footage, which is more efficient, then the overall efficiency goes up,
Right.
right? So like that's really the only thing we can target because we're not tearing down our buildings, we're not gonna start over.
Right.
So really our goal has to be to reduce the overall energy usage as much as possible in the,
Overall.
in the new, which benefits overall.
Right.
I mean, that's the
Because
only thing we
you're
can really
increasing your square
target.
footage.
Yeah.
But you'll get that incremental advantage of the higher efficiency, which will bring that overall EUI, even though you're not improving your existing space.
Right.
It's gonna dilute it, basically. That more efficient will dilute the less efficient, bring it down, bring your EUI
And
down.
like so when the city looks at being net zero by
Yeah, that's
2030,
what it was.
they're still using energy,
Yeah.
right? And so does that mean that they're using just clean energy? Does that mean that they're carbon neutral? Like what is it, what's the
What does
actual?
net zero mean? When people are saying
I don't know,
net
that's
zero
why,
by
like,
2030,
needs-
what would the city look like in 2030 that does not look like now?
So
Someone's in
they're
net
gonna
zero.
say, well, 2030 is gonna be different than 2040 because they want the natural gas out by 2040.
Okay, so
Right.
2030
2030
would
is
look like,
as much, there's, I'm trying to think of what that even looks like.
right.
So it's funny.
I think
we-
that's what I want.
I think
We could go to the zero
Here's
net
what it
energy
looks like.
slide real quick, because
Okay.
we're hitting all over that one. And as we skip, that resilient design, again, it's kind of what it means. It's a design that lasts, it's got some longevity to it. But zero net energy, which is what we're just discussing, just like it says, will need to be carefully defined for each school facility. Definition will need to resolve the relationship with the new addition versus the overall facility, as we're discussing. Now, and again, net zero has some different meanings, whereas you can have a site-specific goal of net zero, means you provide all the power you're using, which is not what we're talking about with these power purchase agreements. But then there's also the net zero where you use more than you create, but you buy into these power purchase agreements and that brings your net to zero. And that's what we've been discussing here. That normally makes the most sense for most people. Nobody normally has a field that they can set up enough solar panels in to
Right.
provide all their power and to have all the redundancy they need. There's always normally some sort of supplementation they need. Yeah. So that is the big part of what we're talking about here. And that gives you the low energy design solutions, what we're talking about. Everything we're talking about doing for the new additions benefits every conversation we're having. It just becomes a matter of, okay, how do you demonstrate the level of benefit you're getting? Or are you getting $24 million worth of benefit from it? Or again, we know there's a premium for designing as high an efficiency of space as you can design. Is that going to eat up your $24 million? Probably not. Now, if it were deemed that, okay, you can go out in this parking lot and add a geothermal system, and that's going to help you overall, and something like that would help. But are we even going to find a condition that
But it's just
That accommodates.
negating using fossil fuels really, right, for power, right? I mean, that's all that we can really do. Because we're not
Yep.
producing, like we're not farming, right? We're not like, there's no carbon emissions other than the use of power to power our schools, right? And presumably our car fleet and our buses, right? So, I mean, it's basically our heating and electric and our transportation fleet, right? Is 100% of our emissions, right? Is there anything else that we would be, so it's basically, if we purchase all clean energy, that's gonna be the vast majority of our emissions to get us to net zero, right? And then it's just the transportation fleet. So as long as we're doing everything we can, as you guys said, to make sure that the building envelope is as efficient as possible.
And bring your EUI down.
Yeah, and so we bring our EUI down and we combine that with making a commitment to purchase only clean energy, then we're basically probably 80% of the way there, right?
And that's what I was telling the student groups. And
Right.
when they were pushing us on this, saying, listen, we're kindred spirits here. We're aligned
Right.
with what, we just differ on how we think
How
we
we
get
might
there
get
based
there.
upon the reality.
I do think that at some stage, it's gonna be important for us to sell this thing, to get any money to sell it, that we somehow, even if it's optics, the lead thing is a good example, we have to wrap our mind around some sort of resolution or some sort of certification we're aiming for, or something other than we are gonna be as sustainable and green as we can. That's just not a soundbite that somebody can grab.
Yeah, but I
onto.
think my point is we don't get to net zero.
We can say that right
So
there.
we can
Right.
say net zero, so that's back to the resolution that
Well, the
we did
biggest,
not agree to.
well, I mean,
initially,
the biggest, yeah, but the biggest, the power isn't gonna be a challenge, it's just gonna be the transportation fleet,
Right.
right? And I don't know how.
No, so I'm just asking, do we want to go back to the table of some commitment to a resolution?
But I think it's just what we just said, we're going to commit to reducing our fossil fuel intake by doing what you just said. Number two is we're going to commit to LEED standards, I believe, whether we want to certify or
Yeah.
not is a whole other conversation, but I think that's a non-starter. And number three, the 24 million, and we're so hooked on that, I feel like just ghost that thing out until
Yeah.
we have an actual number of what we're talking
Well, it's
about by building. And sorry, number four, we're not touching existing buildings, we're only touching new. To me, those four things walking out of here today
But we can-
crystallize
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Right,
But
and
we
then
can
the
put
last
into like a
one,
resolution,
Yeah.
like a,
right,
I
and
mean,
then the
people
last one
want
is
to
gonna
have
be about
something.
replacing our transportation fleet over
Yeah.
time, right?
That's it.
And
So
so
if
those
we
are,
can come
that's
out, that's great. I just want to be able to write that
Yeah.
down. I just want to be able to say
Sure.
that when I get and understand what that means when we say we're committed.
Right. But I
Right?
think
As our
saying net
priorities,
zero
committed
is
to
such a,
environmental, what does that look like?
right, but net
Right.
zero, when you, to me right now, is such a thing to say. I don't really know what that means, but.
Yeah,
we
no,
just
I
described-
agree. We don't have
So
any
we don't
idea what
say
that
that.
means.
We say in
I
our
agree.
effort to follow, with the city, with the,
Could you-
whatever. the
Which is net
commitment,
zero.
Which, yeah, but it means, what you
For
said,
us,
we're
in
gonna
the
be
district,
reducing
it
our
means something
use on
different.
fossil fuel. We're gonna look at all of our buildings and how the energy
Right.
is conducted, and we're going to be moving towards this. And we're going to be doing a LEED standard in all new parts, in all the new that we're doing, which is 25% of our square
Lead
footage.
silver, at least.
Right, and to me, if I heard that, I would say, okay, well, I'm aligned
Yeah.
with the district. and
I
what they're-
agree.
what they're
Well, I think it's a
I just want
community.
something. We have to
I do
communicate
think
this.
it's a community, and I do think we need to get community
Yeah,
buy-in.
yeah.
on it.
right,
Exactly.
but that's why I'm saying if we're in line with the community
Right.
standards of the city and the county,
Mhm.
which is to purchase as much clean energy as possible. And
Right.
whenever that,
We just-
I mean, I guess, whenever that comes
Yes.
online, it'll probably coincide with our buildings, right? Because it's not gonna be before 2023. So that will probably
Will be,
set up well, and then, and that doesn't, I guess, then the education is needed, that we don't need solar farms necessarily. We
Right.
need good building envelopes to a LEED standard, as well as, purchasing clean energy to
Yep.
fuel the buildings, which is now available, as well as, a long-term plan on our transportation. And that's it, right?
So,
and if we
Yeah.
want to talk about what we do with the existing buildings, we talk about that in 2 years, okay? Now we have these great new.
Well, but the
green-
point is you can't do much with it. Like,
Yeah,
the
right.
biggest
No, I
thing
mean,
you can do
is-
is to use clean energy as opposed to using coal.
Right,
Exactly.
So
I mean,
And if we're buying into the solar farms that already exist,
right,
then
we're
we're
not, right.
you know how we left that meeting with the students, that they, and Todd, that they would like, we write up the resolution that we can commit to, and that they could then respond to it, rather than the opposite of them writing us this resolution, not knowing the ins and outs of stuff? Could we do that? Write up something.
We did that about 8 months ago.
Okay, well, a new one then.
But I think you're looking for a recap of this meeting.
Well, not just the recap of this
We
meeting, but that's
are-
what we committed to the students and the groups in the community, that we would have, what does our environmental commitment look like? More than just that it's a priority, what does that look like? And why is it not the net zero? I think that makes sense, why we didn't sign that. I still think that makes sense, because that almost now seems like inauthentic. We can't commit to that, and neither can the city probably, really.
And that was my resistance to it.
Right,
And that's
so
that's where
what does
this-
ours look like, and maybe these 4 or 5 points?
Right.
And they could at least, then we have some primer that we're out there with when we're selling this thing.
Yeah.
And then if it leads into the certification, we're gonna be LEED certified, we're not gonna spend the money to get the certification. If Ed Foundation wants to come in, or some other group wants to come in and spend the money on that piece of it, so that we have that pretty plaque up, great.
Yeah.
But that's not something we're gonna,
The LEED certified, the
Stems.
only building is the high school, right, that has
Right.
LEED certification in it.
right now.
That's cool.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a commitment to follow the community desire to be net zero.
Yeah.
No,
It's
exactly.
a community desire to be as environmentally sound as possible, which, we have to explain the biggest determining factors are creating an energy efficient building envelope and purchasing clean power. And those are the things that are at our disposal.
Mhm.
Putting in, geothermal heating or solar arrays, they're not good uses of money because the return on those from an energy perspective is negligible compared to the other ones, right?
Right.
So that's, it
Let
seems
the
like that's
energy
pretty-
experts do that, and we purchase the,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we're not the experts in,
Yeah,
But then,
no,
Mike?
where you felt that some resistance is that we use gas-fired boilers, it's our primary
right.
heating source, and that's one of the things that we're starting to eliminate, right? So, I'm okay with living with that, because I think that for the next 10 years, I think natural gas is the most efficient process for heating our buildings right now. I think what we should concentrate on is our building envelopes. But we're going to be pushed at a point, or we're going to want to, as a community, at a point, to move away from that. The question is, do we do that now, or do we wait?
Well, do
for
we
another
provide a
idea
price
of
tag of
10
what that
years?
would cost right now to do?
Right.
Right, I mean, because that may be the answer right there, it's like.
Yeah, but it's probably gonna be less the capital improvements and more the operating cost, right? Like, how much more
Right,
expensive
like
is
what-
it to run electric than it is gas?
Right.
4 times.
I don't know, Paul.
They don't even make boilers that would do it now.
Yeah.
They're more-
Yeah, so we
So
can't.
it's not even an
it's
option.
not option.
So when the city commits to the net zero, so Andrew, back to your point of saying we've got to show alignment with this community about the net zero. The city signed it by
County
20,
signed it.
what?
The city and county.
And the county both
And
signed it. And
Both
so
resorts have signed it too.
But
so
they're
it's
gonna,
just-
they're
And
likely
their
gonna move
idea-
it up because
they're gonna
because
work.
of this exact thing, right? So
They're gonna
initially they said they're gonna do it by 2030, but now because they can purchase all their energy as clean energy,
With
they're
that
gonna
still.
look, they may look at moving it up, like the
Okay.
target date. So again, we can probably participate in that as long
Right.
as we are aligned with them, but yeah, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing the same exact thing as
Right,
them.
so that's my question. If they have existing buildings, they do too, right? Our
Yes.
pushback on being able to do it is that we have this existing, 75% of our district property is gonna be existing stuff, right? And that we can't convert right now necessarily.
Right.
How are they committing to this without having to address existing stuff?
Because they're buying it to offset.
Okay, so
Right.
why aren't we doing that? Why couldn't we do that?
We can't
That's
skip.
what we are talking about doing
I
right
know,
now.
but why didn't we not sign that then? Our initial pushback, if I recall from our meeting with the students, was that we can't actually do that.
No, what our pushback to the students was, we can actually do this probably a lot quicker than.
Faster,
2030.
okay.
And that was always my position with them. The other piece, the 2040 piece, where we were talking about removing all of the petrochemicals, that is where the rub is, right? Both from the boilers and also from the transportation fleet. If I'm looking at $1 million electric bus versus $150,000 ultra-low emission diesel, which probably has a lower carbon footprint when you put in all the battery pieces and all the production pieces, you know, where do we want to fall as a district, and where is the smart place to be based upon our limited resources? And so I'm not, you know, if somebody wants to say, hey, here's $60 million, buy a new bus fleet, let's go green, I'll do that tomorrow, right? But the reality is that we don't have that resource available. But that said, I mean, if you look at what's happening in terms of the cost of those buses, there's a company in Illinois that supposedly now is going to be producing these electric school buses
Oh, yeah,
at
you
like
mentioned that.
$350,000 a pop versus $1 million a pop, right? Which but then there's also the argument that we have to retrofit our whole mechanics and how we do, you know, business and our parts supply. And we're I don't know if we have the luxury at this point of being an early adopter as a school district, or
Right.
if we should be on the, you know, you guys work the technology out, we'll get it when it's worked out. That's
Yeah.
kind of where we're falling right now. But I think I didn't want to sign off on, okay, by this date, we're going to be this, because of all the constraints we're talking about, the political realities of our budgets, and that it's limited, and that even though we want to get there, we may not be able to. So I'm not going to sign on to something that I can't commit to. And so that was always my resistance. But I always did tell the student groups, listen, you know, if we can do this,
Yeah.
if we can buy clean energy, why wouldn't we do it? I mean, we'd be stupid not to. If it's a 1% to 2% market increase, and we could, you know, we'd be fools not to. Right?
Even if it's double,
Right.
right? I mean, and I think like if we, you know, I think what you said, Ann, makes a lot of sense, right? If we can just take the line item off, right, we can basically go now to the public and say, okay, this is the total cost of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, this is our view on energy efficiency. You know, we can finalize that resolution at the next meeting, but we know what roughly we're saying. And, you know, we can start preparing and looking at different financing options and taking this forward, because that's what we ultimately have to do
Right.
now. And so if we can,
Right.
if we've answered the question, we say, okay, we have enough information now to know what we can and can't do, let's just move this forward, right? And then at least start, you know, speaking to, you know, going on the radio and the newspaper, speaking to people about what this looks like, what our philosophy on the buildings are, how it came about, you know, reminding everyone that this has been a 2-year process, all of that, because I think, you know, the questions are going to start coming, and at least now we know, okay, this is our ideal project. And, you know, I think that whatever that first slide was is probably, you know, the starting place, which is, okay, these are our priorities, right? Getting the 9th grade into the high school, getting the 8th grade into Akron, moving Treasure Hill, all of these things. Because then I think the fun stuff can start, which is, okay, how do we pay for it? And then, you know, who wants to partner with us, right? And, you know, whether that's the city, whether that's different community organizations, whether it's philanthropy, and then people can start being creative as well, right? If we have space where Treasure is, what's going to be there? Is it a shared use facility, right? Is it, you know, as we've had talks with different groups, right? Senior center and different people who've come in over time, you know, when we do wraparound services, who else can use those? You know, and start really socializing those ideas so that people understand how the community really benefits from these projects. It's not just, you know, spending $100 million on upgrading our school facilities. It's really creating lasting, sustainable community buildings, right? So,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's pretty cool. This is good stuff.
So to go back to that first slide where it has our master planning and implementation on number 7, is that where we want to change those, incorporate the green enhancements for sustainability and change 1, 2, and 3 to net zero, leads to keep the lead standard or good, you know, clean building envelope, and revise those?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's done.
That those are,
Yeah, we
that
can do
those
it.
are the priorities that you're looking for and the principles?
Well, I think, you know, the 4 or 5 points that you wrote down, Wendy, I think you have
Yeah, so
it
if you
best.
have them.
And we just,
Well, what we might want to do is if you go to the nice thing about the way this has kind of progressed, if we go to slide, I don't know which slide number it is, but go to, it's going to $75 allowance is at the top.
I always thought that one.
Right there.
Yep,
All right, back.
back.
Okay, so I think with everything I've heard, the nice thing is the discussions we've been having over the last couple of weeks, that's how this slide's evolved. But I think kind of the outcome of what you guys have been talking about and where we are and how we want to prioritize our approach to this. So the way we kind of culminated this was we have low energy design solutions, reduce the EUI, which is make these spaces efficient as possible. We have the power purchase agreement, House Bill 411, that's buying the clean energy. Item number 3, upgrade existing building equipment or electrification of buildings equipment to reduce or eliminate burning of carbon greenhouse gas fuels. I mean, that's a goal that we'd look at in the design process. Doesn't mean we're going to necessarily go switch to something that's electric. It's based on, energy efficiency and that sort
Could
of
we
stuff.
say like evaluate, because that's really an evaluation?
It would be,
isn't it?
that's
Versus
what
like-
it is. And that's,
Because I think that
that's-
sounds like an action point, and I think we need to make it the
yes,
evaluation.
evaluation of upgrading.
Yeah, that would be
yes.
clearer to me.
That's good point. And then there is the lead aspect of it, which we've got here either with or without a certification. So use that as a guideline.
Do we-
Now, what David also references is the DFCM High Performance Building Standard, which is the state of Utah. Department of Facilities Construction Management has a high performance building specification, which is something we could also look at and say, okay, we want to take it to that level of efficiency.
And do we want to say silver or above, or do we want to just leave it open? Leave it open?
Again, this was meant to be, if we decide in this, if you guys decide, okay, we want to make it, this is the minimum,
Yeah.
then that would be the mandate. This was the other thought process going and say,
Okay.
that would become the policy.
Is the DFCM high performance building, is that similar to like LEED, silver LEED?
I could
gold?
get more information on that. David's real familiar with it, he was at the state for a while,
Okay.
so I can find out from him and we can shoot something back through to
So
give a little more
it's just
description on that.
basically saying the same thing?
I think so.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it.
But I think we should set a standard, not to do it, not just so we all know what the aim is,
Mhm.
and, it's here or above.
Here's the minimum
Right, so we're
expectation.
not.
Well, I think we are, I think if we're gonna say that we're doing it to LEED standard, it's basically minimum of silver.
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
So
great.
we kind of know
Great.
Yeah.
if that's the
Yep,
rough.
minimum of silver, perfect. Okay.
And then the second, number 1 that's at the bottom, actually number 5, was just kind of a recap of the options for clean renewable energy sources, which we know there's a lot of limitations to trying to do that site specific. And it just becomes really a quantity of square footage of property that you own. That's why we keep going back to the power purchase agreement as the more viable option.
That's where I would get rid of that off.
Totally.
I don't know how you guys feel, but get rid of that, yeah, and
we're not
focus on
energy
House
clean
Bill
and
411.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not a solar
That makes
farm or a
sense.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think 1 through 4 kind of summarized what you
Yep.
were talking about.
Yeah, did you have something?
So yeah, just 2 things. One, I want to clarify something that I said earlier. The city can do, they are trying to achieve the net zero, and and it sounds like they're trying to move it up. And I think that's great. I was trying to figure out how are they committing to that, and we didn't. And I'm still not totally clear on that.
I think it's
Doesn't matter,
because
but
it's because
what
they
the difference
are one of
is.
the initial buyers of the clean power from Rocky Mountain. It goes
Okay.
online at the end of next
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they're no longer purchasing fossil fuel, and that gets them most of the way there, right? So there's
Okay.
there's building efficiencies and things like the same that we're doing, right?
Right.
Like, they have less square footage than we do, but it's the same thing, right? They're gonna look at their fleet, like their bus system's all electric and
Yeah, got it.
all of
So
that.
they have
right? So
other
it's-
options, so they can achieve that,
Yeah.
which is great,
Yeah.
and that's something to support.
And I could be wrong, and I'm sorry, but you keep saying like that we wouldn't commit. I don't think we said we wouldn't commit. I think we said we needed a pause until we basically got here today where we could sit down and tie everything back in with our
Right.
master planning. That we were saying, hey, we're committed to the environment, we want to do this,
No,
but
we
it's
couldn't
smart
commit to
for
sign
us.
the resolution.
Right, but it's
That's what I
smart
meant.
for us to do the resolution when we're in conjunction with everything else and that we're aligned.
No,
And
I'm clear
I'm
that we
like-
always said that. I'm
Okay.
trying to understand why we didn't sign, why we still wouldn't sign that resolution
I
right
don't
now.
think we would, we.
Are we, no, we're gonna change, right.
But it needed to be, it needs to be, right, and I
We
think
need
we
to
said that
update
too,
too.
like, we need to
Yeah,
make
no,
sure
I was
that
in that
it
meeting
was.
yeah, we did say
Okay.
that.
Well, I
I
think
think that we just did not sign that. There was a lot of confusion out there and hurt and wonder why we did not sign the resolution.
You're saying
as
that the one that was
stated with
presented
the-
to us
Yes,
by
by
the
the
That was-
students.
What part of it was a natural, getting off natural gas?
Yeah.
It's just- I mean, that's almost impossible to do. I
So
didn't want to
we,
commit to
we're
that.
not committing to some of the same things the city was.
Yeah,
Based on the resolution, which is just clear. It didn't mean we weren't committed to environmental, which
No, no.
we went over with them
No, no, I
clearly, and
think-
they understood that.
I think we're talking about different things. I think
Right.
the resolution that was presented by the students went beyond what the city's committed to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're saying, is we're aligned with the community standards and what the city is doing, which is to target net zero. In order to do that, like the only way we can possibly do that is to make a commitment to purchase clean energy, to make our buildings as efficient as possible, and to make a commitment towards clean transportation. Those are the things that we're doing that are causing carbon emissions. So that's the resolution that's applicable to us. Making, it'd be great if we could not use gas. We use all solar and electric. That's, but it's not practical, and
Right.
the cost of it is prohibitive.
Right.
And so
No, and I think this is great, we have to be clear with them. I don't want to conflate that we are doing something that we're not doing. We did not sign a resolution that they brought to us.
Right.
For reasons that would not work for the district.
Right.
So it's not that we're not committed to the environment. We could not sign that resolution to state the district, a resolution that the city could sign.
Well, that's what I
Right,
was-
so we agreed to at the end of the meeting, remind me if I'm wrong, but that we both said, actually, we didn't want to commit to something we knew we couldn't achieve.
Right.
They kept saying there's no legal ramifications. We said, well, then why would we wouldn't want to commit to something we couldn't achieve.
Right.
So can we bring to you what we think we can achieve? And then sign that resolution.
And that was
And
always
they were
my
happy
position.
with it.
Is
Right.
that
So now we just have to go back to them.
we're aligned
Perfect.
aspirationally.
And that's where we are.
Yeah.
We just
I think
have a
that's-
different set of
yeah,
constraints we're looking at. It's not that
Right,
we don't want to
and I
get there.
have-
okay.
And we've got the responsibility as a school district, a school board,
To
to
do
marry up
this.
theory and
Yes.
reality, right? We've got limited resources to get in this direction.
Yes.
We're moving in that direction,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
can't commit to your timelines that are artificially.
And that the city can't, and the county can, that's great. Okay, we support that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so let's move off, let's go back on the topic with what you guys need from us, with where we're.
So we're
That's
taking
one thing
number
they-
one.
No, not that, us.
Yeah, so
Can I
guys.
ask a water question, since that is a super hot topic? Is that kind of folded into all of this, I'm assuming, or is water a separate thing?
Water's
or-
a separate thing.
Okay.
We have the most efficient water system money can buy. It's
Okay.
called Weather Track. And we've even gone in and turned way down, but we still have commitments to the communities for athletic events this summer. And so I've got to keep some ones.
But like, do our toilets flush with half water? Do we, turn off sprinklers with
All of
grass?
that is part of the LEED certification.
Great.
Knowing what I've had, like when I
Yeah, great.
work and we build buildings
Great.
and hear about it, like they all,
So
like
that
all
would
of
be
that was
folded
part
in.
of that, yeah.
And again, but it wouldn't be retrofitted to existing building, I'm making it up. If the high school doesn't have, efficient flushing toilets, we're not going in and changing every toilet. But every new toilet, I love talking about toilets, every new one in the new part of the building would be energy efficient. And then if at some point in time we wanted to address that because it became a bigger issue, we could have a whole nother conversation.
Well, and as you know, over time, these, things are going to change, right? I mean, it's going to become more efficient for us to buy that toilet. It's going to be more efficient for us to buy that bus, and maybe over time, those economies will change to a point where we can make a modest investment that doesn't make sense financially, but as a community, our folks are willing to sign off on that. So I think, again, it was never that we were resistant to the direction. We were aligned aspirationally. I said, hey, this House Bill 411, we could probably get to the first goal much earlier than what you're asking for. The second goal is where the sticking point is, and we're going to have to marry up reality with,
Yeah.
with the goal.
Perfect. No, I just want to bring up water because it's super duper sensitive right now. There's
Absolutely.
everything going on, so I just want to make sure that's on our radar.
So do you guys
We
have
different
all,
things though, but we did, as part of COVID mitigation, we actually did go back and we did retrofit, so all of the faucets are touchless.
Yeah.
So you only use the water
Water
and
and
your
need,
hands
right.
are there, you're not gonna ever have something, dripping or leaking or
Running all day long, great.
We do have auto flushers, which, again, you don't have anybody sitting there and
Wasting gallons of water.
yeah,
Got
right,
it.
so we've got certain things, and even everything like the light motion sensors, all that, the LED lights, all those kinds of projects, as Mike and Todd have said, those have been ongoing. So anytime we can,
We
look onto
always-
those things,
Yeah.
right, we're
I
always
think
gonna
those are
try to-
really, going back to the optics and the talking points, those
Yes.
are all really good things to give ourselves credit for that have already been on the radar that we've never been asked
We have
to
a
do.
system
That we do.
we have
Yeah.
a system when a toilet gets stuck on, it'll call me.
Oh, how lucky for
Yeah.
you.
Well, yeah, we can fix it. So it's not wasting water.
Right, good, I get it. Anyway, so just
Okay.
as a talking about, I like it. Okay.
Perfect.
Done.
So as far as you go, do you need, what other direction do you need from the board right now?
Well, I think the resolution will tie back into the planning factors that Paul needs to give direction to the architect that we eventually will hire. And say, we're going to be buying, our electric from this, we want it the most efficient envelope possible, design standards, LEED, silver, and kind of go down that list. He can then hand to the planning architect to design this.
So Mike, can I work with you on writing that
Sure.
resolution?
Yep.
And when we say winning
Wanting to sign
architect,
something.
is it architect or architects? Cool.
Maybe, it might be architect. But,
Yet to be determined.
yeah, that's right.
Does anybody else have any more questions, concerns? Do you
I
guys
think
have any questions or concerns for us?
So can we just go back to the line item of 24 million? Are we gonna just kind of ghost that out
Yeah.
and see what this
Yeah.
actually
It's gone.
Yeah.
is? So that's great.
I think
Perfect.
so.
I'm clear. Thank you.
Now, does that mean 24 million is gone from the budget?
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
so when we have discussions with the contractors, it's
Yep.
gonna be, we're gonna remove any of that $75 a square
Yep.
foot per
Yep.
se.
Yeah,
Concept.
we're off that. Fabulous. This was
Okay.
really good.
Better
I'm-
clear than unclear.
Yeah, I'm so clear right now. Thank you. This is great.
Anything else? Dr. Yoga, do you have anything?
Sounds good.
So,
Nothing.
okay. All right, well then we will go ahead and adjourn until our next regular session meeting on August 17th at 4 p.m.
Great. I'm like, great to have a babysitter.
Happy summer.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
World has to
Thank
be
you.
a
See
cost,
you.
moves in on the side.
I was like, great to have a babysitter.
That is our, oh, we don't have a truth in taxation.
No.
No.
We are raising taxes.
So we are good.
Don't need
So
a
that's great.
taxation hearing, however, we will,
Absolutely. If we have to have another work session or another meeting. On the buses that are being developed in Illinois, is there any way that we could be a test for them at like high altitude, kind of?
I just heard about this as an anecdote. I'll drill down on that more to see who the manufacturer is, where they're at in the process, what the actual price points are.
With a battery operated, we don't have the power to go up, right? With
Well,
high road or-
it's, actually, electrical power applied correctly can be very efficient. Our problem with